Good evening, everyone. This is Chris Lundy with the Sawtooth Avalanche Center with your weekend update for Friday, February 24th. As always, remember this is no substitute for the avalanche forecast, so be sure and check that each day you head out into the backcountry. Looking back to last weekend, we had relatively stable conditions. We had low danger in 3 out of the 4 zones, and we were looking ahead to an atmospheric river event that was forecast to arrive Monday night into Tuesday. So we were expecting this danger to change pretty significantly. Um, but as sometimes happens, the stormy week ahead was not as stormy as forecast. In fact, I think Ben had a pretty good quip in Tuesday morning's forecast. Atmospheric river, this feels more like an atmospheric rivulet. So despite not getting the sort of large amounts of snow that they had forecast, we did get some snow, and it did end up being a stormy week, just not quite what we were expecting. Let's take a look at the week's weather at our Titus weather stations. On the bottom is lower Titus, and these blue bars represent snow that fell, and this black line is the cumulative snow water equivalent over the week. So you can see that over the course of the week, lower Titus picked up 1.4 inches of water, which ended up being about 12 to 14 inches of snow. And most of this snow, we had a couple little dribs and drabs through the weekend and then early in the week, but the bulk of the snow came Monday night into Tuesday. And then we had more snow trickling in, and then another pretty good blip of snow last night on Thursday night. The main round of snow, the atmospheric rivulet, if you will, came with quite a bit of wind. So while the snow was less than forecast, the wind was pretty much spot on. So we had pretty strong to extreme winds coming from the west and northwest. So that definitely blew around a lot of that new snow and transported it onto leeward slopes. And then we've also had a little bit of a bump up in the wind later this week that accompanied some of the unsettled weather and snowfall later in the week, like last Thursday night into Friday morning. So even though, yeah, we didn't get a ton of snow, we did pick up some. So let's take a look at our storm totals. We have 10 to 14 inches in the Galena Summit and Eastern Mountains. In the Soldier of Wind River Valley, Baldy picked up about 8 to 10 inches, and the Soldiers actually picked up quite a bit, 18 to 20, with a bulk of that falling Thursday night, so just last night. And that was sort of an unexpected little pulse of snow there, and they definitely got more than the rest of our forecast area during that little storm last night. Then we had 12 to 16 inches in the Sawtooth and Western Smokies and Banner Summit. So those are storm totals over the course of a week. So if you've been following what the weather was doing, it just seemed like everywhere around us was getting pounded with snow. And if you looked at the avalanche.org national danger map on Tuesday morning, you would see that sure enough, almost everywhere around us had considerable or high danger, and there were even some avalanche warnings in place. So somehow we just ended up in a donut hole where we just didn't get the snow that everywhere else did. But from time to time that happens. We're fortunate we just got some. So even though we didn't get a ton of snow, as many of you know, the snow was falling on very weak snow surfaces consisting of sugary facets and often mixed in with crusts. So lots of weak snow out there. And while this the storm activity didn't produce widespread slab avalanches, it just wasn't quite enough load to create issues. On wind-loaded slopes, we did see quite a bit of avalanche activity. In fact, this was probably the most avalanche activity we've seen in a number of weeks. We've had kind of little storms here and there over the past month, and this one definitely produced more avalanche activity than previous storms. So we observed at least 10 large avalanches greater than D2 in size, and probably more out there that we didn't see. Maybe we'll get some more observations in today with the sunny skies. A lot of very small avalanches occurred. And we had 3 human-triggered avalanches. So these were the first human-triggered avalanches in quite some time, and we'll take a look at those. As I alluded to, these are primarily occurred on wind-loaded slopes, where added wind transport and drifting created enough of a slab on those underlying weak layers to produce some avalanche activity. And then many of these wind slab avalanches broke wider than they might often break due to having some underlying weak snow. This is a slope that's probably familiar to a lot of viewers. This is that kind of steep slope right above the highway as you head up to the top of Galena Summit. And this actually, probably had a little bit of a wind effect to it, but not a, sort of a heavily loaded slope. And you can see that slab is pretty thin, but just an indicator of just how weak that snow is that all this new snow is falling on. This is a large avalanche on Parks Peak in the kind of central to southern Sawtooths. This is on a southeast facing slope. And you can see this pretty extensive crown line along the top on the leeward side of this ridge. Pretty wide propagation, which is a good sign that there's a weak layer beneath that, but in a pretty classically, leeward wind-loaded slope. But as that avalanche initiated, interestingly, it pulled into some deeper snow here and broke down into some deeper weak layers. Hard to say what that was, but we had plenty of weak layers that we buried back in January and then back in December and then in early January. So that was quite a large avalanche. I'll take a little zoomed out view here. You can see that initial crown from the previous photo ran down all the way here. And then you can see some debris running all the way down here. So pretty good size wind slab avalanche. And then moving into the northern Sawtooths on Merritt Peak, which is a pretty prominent peak if you're standing in Stanley looking into the Sawtooths. Have some wind slab avalanches here. And these are actually pretty classic sawtooth patterns. When the snow falls, it tends to bounce down these cliffs and often forms these slabs beneath these cliffs. We sometimes call those spindrift slabs, but it's really a kind of a type of wind slab. The key point is that it's getting additional load from snow bouncing down those cliffs and landing on those slopes. And then here's another avalanche on kind of another flank of Merritt Peak. You can see a crown here, again, underneath some of those cliffs and running all the way down into the flats here. Moving on to the triggered slides, this is a small triggered avalanche that occurred in Alturas Lake Creek. This was triggered by a sledder, and it actually caught and carried the rider. But as you can see, it's not a huge avalanche, so he was fine and unburied. But out Titus Ridge, past the peak above Titus Lake, going out further out the ridge towards Titus Peak proper, some skiers on the ridgeline remotely triggered this avalanche, and this one was bigger. It was large enough to bury or injure a person for sure. So you can see that crown here, and again, in classically wind-loaded terrain indicated by cornices. Just a perfect place for that wind to transport and deposit wind-blown snow and drifted snow. And then we take a view from the bottom. You can see it's definitely a large avalanche, nothing that you would have wanted to get tangled in, especially with all these trees down here at the bottom, increasing the consequences of that slide. But again, that one was remotely triggered, so nobody was caught. They were just walking on the ridge, felt a collapse, and got that avalanche to release. So let's take a look ahead to the coming weekend, starting with weather and just taking a generalized weather forecast here from Galena Summit to give you an idea of what to expect. We have looks like another beautiful sunny day tomorrow with temperatures getting a little bit warmer. And then Saturday night, fairly cold. And then we have a little weather system moving in Sunday and Sunday night. And that weather system will bring 2 to 4 inches across most of our area, definitely favoring our northern and western mountains. In fact, some of the Sawtooths and maybe Banner Summit might even pick up more on the 4 to 6 side. And then a little lull, and then another system moves in Monday night into Tuesday, and that one seems about similar in size, but still several days out from that one. So be sure to tune in earlier in the week and see how that one's shaping up. And this weekend's avalanche conditions, basically going to be seeing a lot of what we've seen the last couple days. I don't expect any real big changes in the avalanche danger. I think it'll be just kind of more of the same. So we're mostly concerned about wind-loaded slopes. So very steep slopes over about 35 degrees that are wind-loaded are the most likely to produce avalanches. And this is getting harder to recognize what slopes are wind-loaded. Just with all these little storms we've had this week, some of those little, few inches of snow here and there, that masks the sometimes the visible effects from the wind. So it's not always easy to identify which slopes have been loaded, but it's pretty safe to assume we've had, wind from a number of different directions. We've had new snow so it's safe to assume that most upper elevation open wind exposed slopes have been drifted to some extent. So staying away from, the steep upper elevation wind exposed slopes, you're going to avoid most of the avalanche problems. And there's really good skiing and riding on sheltered slopes right now. So there's really not a whole lot of reason to head up into that wind exposed terrain. We've continued to talk about the possibility of rogue avalanches breaking deeper in weak layers on the snowpack. And this would be, these would be kind of outlier avalanches, but they're not outside the realm of possibility in rocky alpine terrain. And thinking about primarily the alpine reaches of the Boulders, Pioneers, and White Cloud Mountains. And then small loose snow avalanches will become possible on sunny slopes with Saturday's kind of sunshine and warming temperatures. So I hope that gives you a picture of what to expect for the weekend. Should be some great skiing and riding. Get out there and get it while the getting's good. Be sure to check the forecast and let us know what you're seeing out there. We'd love to hear your observations, and you can submit those on our website at sawtoothavalanche.com. Thanks for watching.